me ask you something. Which one of these two stories is more intriguing or interesting? As I walked out the door, I saw a looming figure in the threshold. He smelled of smoke and fresh earth. I gasped as he turned and I saw his face. I knew this man. Or number 2. I opened the door and I bumped into Gary, the gardener.
Hi, Gary.
I'm betting number 1 was a lot more compelling, right? That's probably because when telling a story, it's usually best to describe things in a way that leaves enough room for your own imagination to fill in the rest of the picture. There's really no greater story to be told than the one that our own brains are capable of concocting if given the proper, incomplete information. For example, if I describe to you a beautiful face that I saw walking down the street, your mind's eye will inevitably produce a face that is based on what you think of as beautiful. And even if it's using bits and pieces of my own description, odds are it won't be that similar to the face that I actually saw. On the other hand, if I just show you a picture of that person, I'll ruin your mental picture, and seeing as you might not have the same taste as I do, you might actually find that face to be not beautiful at all. That's why I think movie adaptations of popular books are often so disappointing. They're rarely able to compete with the movie we've made up in our own minds, and often fail to meet our personal expectations. Now, what does this all have to do with music making, you might ask? Well, to me at least, the best music is the music that tells a story, that transmits an emotion, but without spelling it out to you in bold capital letters. That's what I love about instrumental music, and that's what I love about music with vague lyrics. It can mean whatever you interpret it to mean, but the more information they give you, the less room for you to put in your own interpretation of the material you're given, and that makes it a bit less interesting. Now, lately, I realized that for years, I've been guilty of doing just that, of giving away the smoking gun, so to speak, way too early in most of my music by doing something as simple as by thoughtlessly misusing the placement of chords and triads in my music. Let me explain. As far as popular Western music is concerned, it's fairly typical that a song will stick to a certain musical scale. Of course, the scale can vary within the same song, and more complex songs love to jump all over the place, but usually your brain picks up on the cues to know where you're standing, even if you're not a musical theory buff. Even if you can't name the scale, you should have a sense for it. It's intuitive. And the best way to prove that is that if you hear a note or a chord that isn't normally in that scale, you're probably going to notice it. That is not necessarily a bad thing, mind you, and I'm actually a big fan of using borrowed notes or notes that don't belong in the scale to add interest, but my point here is your ears just usually know. The scale will also help set the mood or the tone of the song. Like when you identify a song to be set in a major scale, usually it'll mean that it's supposed to be a happy or uplifting song. Where, contrary to that, where a song is set in a minor scale, you usually associate it with a sad mood or sad song. So even if you can't consciously put a name to that scale, your mind also starts developing certain expectations as to where the notes and the chords should be moving towards. For example, if I were to play a C major chord or a 1 chord, then an A minor, then an F major, your ear is probably thinking this should resolve into a G major chord or the 5th. It's an extremely common chord progression and your brain is just used to hearing that all over the place. And that's the problem. There are only so many notes at our disposal, so many chord progressions available. So how do you keep it interesting? How do you give enough incomplete information for you to be able to tell the same story in a new way? Now, this is something that I've struggled with for years, and I assume that it's something that most people that pick up a piano or a guitar sometime in their life will struggle with as well. Since the very first thing that you're taught are chord shapes on the guitar, most campfire guitarists will usually just play the chords of the songs they know. I know, I was one of them. Later on, when I got into learning piano, after learning scales, there they were again, my old friends, the chords. The good old trusty triads, where all you have to think about is when the third is major or minor. Especially when learning your favorite songs, the chord charts are always there for you to learn them. But the funny thing is, no matter how well you memorize playing those triads, it never sounds the same as the original, does it? And that's because if you actually pay attention to the music that you're listening to, you'll very rarely find someone just straight out playing chords up front, especially at the very beginning of the song. My favorite example of this is Radiohead's How to Disappear Completely. It starts off with this hanging note, then a guitar part and a bass part that don't exactly let you know where you are or what scale you're in. And that, of course, is part of the whole uneasy and unsettling feeling that they're going after. It's not until much later in the song that you actually get a sense for the scale, and that's when the whole thing starts developing. But even in a song much less musically ambitious, like for example Benson Boone's Beautiful Things, the first couple of verses are just the voice and a couple of guitar notes that give off the whole vibe, but not a chord in sight until much later. And that's when it hit me. Even though I've been making music for so many years, I've been making this beginner mistake. I've been giving away the entire plot of my story at the very beginning of the song by using entire chords and triads. So now let me show you a chord progression where I don't jump the gun immediately and I don't give away the third until a bit later, or maybe I just hint at it with the melodic line that I'm doing. I've been doing this a lot lately in my music making, where I'll of course be hitting the root note on my left hand, but I'll just be drawing out the chord melodically so I don't give the whole thing away immediately. And I do think that it does sound a bit more interesting, don't you? I'll even go a step further and suggest that you try avoid hitting the third in your melodic line for as long as you can. In my recent chord progression, I didn't hit it until the very last note of the whole progression. That way, your listener doesn't really know what direction you're going. That new way of thinking has really opened up the keyboard for me. See, before, my right hand was always mirroring my left hand, so if I was playing a C major chord, you can bet my pinky was in the root note C. But now, I'll mix and match to find beautiful combinations that were just not there for me before. Like now that I was playing an F, but I was doing the melody on C. Now before all you real musicians go down in the comments and start torching me, I am not suggesting that triads and chords are not important or that you shouldn't use them. They are absolutely a foundational part of both playing and composing, but once you have them down, you really need to start picking them apart and using them more as guidelines to a more mature form of orchestration. Now, I'm pretty sure that more seasoned musicians already know everything I'm sharing here, but I'm self-taught and I hadn't really thought about this before, and I've been playing for years, so I'm actually sharing this for the people that, just like me, might have been spending loads of time playing and composing without really thinking about this or never realizing it before. Just somebody that's 2 steps behind me in this amazing journey that we call music making. And that's what I love about music, because every now and then you'll learn something new that just opens up a world of possibilities, and you're back to square one feeling like a beginner again. And I really hope that feeling never goes away. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful, or at least entertaining. Have a great week. See you next time.